Yeah, I guess to go ahead and get started, I'll also put this in the chat so that you can kind of read it as you go as a long introduction. But if you could, for panelists, if you could share your name, your current job, the languages that you studied or that you speak, and then kind of a brief overview of your career story. How did you get to where you are today? So let me go ahead and put that in the chat. And Joanne, you are like top left of my screen. So do you want to start?
Sure,
So,
happy to
awesome.
start.
So we'll,
Um, I don't remember everything you said,
yeah, so
so
I'm
I'm
putting it in
very
the chat
sorry.
right now. Name, current job, languages, and then career story.
Name, that's easy. So my name is Joanne Carlson. I currently work for the Washington State Department of Ecology. Um, I live in Central Washington. So Yakima, Washington is 2.5 hours east of Seattle. For those of you who may not know where that is, and it's dry. I live in the semi-desert in the valley, so the beautiful pine trees or whatever, Seattle, no, 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 no. We don't have that here. We have dust. So there's that. I went to ASU for Spanish, which I speak a lot better than I used to, thankfully. But I grew up in Jamaica. I'm Jamaican by birth, and so I also speak Jamaican patois as well. My husband is speaks German, so naturally there's bleed over, so there's some German running around in my brain as well. But the interesting thing about my background is, since I grew up in the Caribbean, you were required in my high school for the first 3 years of high school to learn French and Spanish for the first 3 years because the Caribbean has is multilingual, right? So we were required to do that. So that's my background is languages are always part of what I did. Um, let's see. Career story. Well, when it comes to ASU, I graduated in 2023. So this is my third degree because I'm a nerd. I have always loved Spanish and I wanted to actually become better at it, become closer to fluent. So I studied it and I got my BA in Spanish and I used it at work for a multilingual interpretation and translation team that we had at the state. They had Korean, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Spanish. And I worked with the Spanish team. I had to take a really, really hard test to get on the team, written and spoken. It was 2.5 hours of the written part, and then it was another hour of presentation for the spoken part. And I used it to help with translating documents for different things with ecology, whether it was surveys about air quality, water quality, whatever it was, public meetings. And sometimes because we have a high percentage of Spanish speakers in our population that will come to the front door with questions and so on, we needed to have people who could help with interpretation. So sometimes I'd be called on to help with that as well. So that's kind of my thing.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then if anyone does have any kind of follow-up questions that occur to them, or just general questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and then I can either kind of decide the flow of, are we going to ask it right then? Is it something we're going to come back to? If you do have a question for a specific panelist, if you would just address, put their name in, who the question is for, that would be helpful. But yeah, feel free to put those in the chat kind of as they occur to you if you would like to. But thanks so much, Joanne. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. I'm Laura French, and my current job is Director of State Government Relations for TSMC Arizona, and I speak Spanish. I do not really speak Portuguese, but I did study it for a year and um, can say a few things still, but I was never able to practice it. So I graduated from ASU in 1996 in the 1900s, the last century, which is just so weird to say. But I did study my last semester in Madrid, Spain, which um, for the students on, if you haven't done that, I highly suggest studying abroad. I think it opens up your world in so many ways. I took a lot of different jobs and paths to get here, but was really foreign affairs, international relations is a deep passion of mine. So I got a master's in that at Georgetown and then stayed in DC, worked at a couple nonprofits, and came back to Phoenix. And I worked for the state government for about 10 years in the Office of Tourism. And that's where my boss at the time said, you know about the legislature, some government affairs people, I want you to be our lobbyist. And I kind of freaked out. I never would have thought that, but I'm so deeply grateful for that because it allowed me to grow my career in that way. And so now I'm here doing government relations, working with city, state, and county, um, all forms of government, trying to really help this company from Taiwan make its place here in Arizona. I've been almost 5 years.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right. Emma, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Kaz Frick. Um, I graduated from ASU with a bachelor's in Chinese in 2015. My language journey kind of started in high school. I went to a private school that required us to take language all 4 years, and they also offered Latin. So I've studied Latin, French, Japanese, and then Chinese, of course, was my big passion. But I've jumped all over the place. My partner right now speaks Korean, so I'm picking up some Korean. Really, the theme of my life is I've just been following an eclectic collection of passions. But it seems to have worked out for me so far, thank goodness. Um, so in high school, I studied in a exchange program, a high school exchange program, and they sent me to Chengdu, China. And that's where kind of my interest just in language and culture in general started. Um, but Chinese specifically. And then for my bachelor's, I decided I'm going to go all in and I'm going to study Chinese. And I really enjoyed my experience. I also studied abroad. I took 2 summers where I went to 2 different programs and stayed 8 weeks each, and huge leaps in my ability to speak. So if you have the opportunity to do that, it's the best thing for your language skills is just to really dive in. After that, my family is all in healthcare, so I kind of returned to the fold there. And my experiences from my degree and from my experiences just being with other cultures and having to do a lot of reading and write a lot of papers have always supported basically everything else I have tried to do. And my current role is the director of clinical research at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Dentistry, so healthcare being dentistry. Um, with that, I have also recently started my PhD program, and I just passed my qualifying exam this past January. I'm totally burned out from that, but I'm still here. So, no matter where life takes you, just I guess my thing is just follow your passions, and you never know the kind of skills that you'll pick up and be transferable elsewhere. I see a question in chat. I studied, technically, I guess we would call it Mandarin, but it's the Putonghua. It's the mainland China, like official government language.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. And then Rico?
Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Miriam, for the invitation to participate with this panel. My name is Rico Martinez. I'm in the legal department at SBS Strategic Business Solutions. We're a professional services company located in Scottsdale. We have offices in Grand Rapids and also offices in London and South Africa. We provide legal services to corporate legal departments and to law firms. I started studying Japanese in high school and just kind of continued with it. I graduated in 2000 with a Bachelor of Arts in Japanese and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and I earned a Certificate of East Asian Studies. And as part of my undergraduate program, I attended Hiroshima Shudo University for a year on exchange through ASU. It was an amazing experience, really a formative experience for me. I was able to take upper division courses entirely in Japanese, wrote papers in Japanese, took the final exams in Japanese along with all the other students. I also passed the Japanese language proficiency test at that time at the advanced level. So it was really a great experience. Right after I graduated, I worked here in Chandler at Intel at the Ocotillo site, I was a project interpreter for a company called Nikon Precision. So they install all of these machines that help with photolithography. They, etch all of the circuitry onto the silicon wafers. So I assisted all those engineers who came over to install those machines. I wore the white, clean room suit, interpreted meetings with Intel and Nikon engineers. I think they're called process engineers, and just help them go through like safety training and all of that, all of basically taking care of them while they were here. After that, I attended the JET program. A lot of people know that program. It was a year as a coordinator for international relations in a small municipality in southern Japan. I planned a lot of cultural events. I even had a very short like a television series where I would interview international students and businesses, just something that just happened because I was talking with people and talking with someone who knew a contact at the local cable station. And he's like, oh, let's go talk to these people and tell them your idea. And I wasn't even planning on doing anything like that, but they said, yeah, we'll do that as long as you're in it. It wouldn't be interesting if we're doing it, but we'll do it if you do it. So I did that for a little while. Um, I came back to Arizona and I actually worked here at ASU at the Center for Asian Studies. I think by the time I left, they renamed it the Asia Center, I think it's called now. But while I was working there, I earned a master's in public administration and then immediately went to University of Arizona for law school. And then while I was in law school, to get another bite at the apple, I did another semester in Japan as part of Temple University's Tokyo Law Campus program. Most of the courses, of course, were in English, but I did take a course taught entirely in Japanese by the General Counsel for IBM Japan. It was really a great experience. And after I graduated, it was about 2010. The job market was really bad. We were right in the middle of a recession. And I had my job offer revoked because of budget issues. And I wasn't the only law student who experienced that. And usually the way it works is you have on-campus interviews, and so that law students can have a job right after they pass the bar. So that happened. I decided okay, I'm just going to pass the bar and figure out what to do later. And I basically was a bookstore for about 3 months selling all my used law school books to make money. And then I found a job ad on Craigslist for a Japanese speaking attorney. I don't know if Craigslist is even active today, but back then it's kind of like classified ads where people sold furniture, bicycles, or laptops that happened to be stolen, right? So I remember thinking like, has it come down to this? Like I'm looking for a legal job on Craigslist. And so I did apply and I got hired. And it was even in a kind of like a renovated old Revlon factory on Buckeye Road. There's no other law firms around there. So I remember walking into the lobby and they had these, you know, uh, the walls had like large photos of 90s models for Revlon, like Halle Berry, Cindy Crawford, Melanie Griffith. And it was like 180 degrees from anything I thought would be like a law firm environment. It didn't look like any legal shows I'd ever seen, on TV for sure. But it actually really saved me financially. It was how I got my start. I just wanted to share that because, there's always going to be setbacks. Things didn't work out the way I wanted. I didn't get the job offer I initially wanted. And I had turned down other job offers after, and then found out they, revoked my offer. So, that was a difficult part, but you just keep pressing forward. I still learned a ton at that job, and that's kind of how I got my start.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that story. And then Emma says you had a friend who participated in JET. That's great. Yeah, definitely a really popular one for Japanese language students. All right. And then Julia, I know that you need to leave pretty soon. You have other things to get to. So, what questions do you have for our panelists? Feel free. You can either put them in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself and ask that way, that works as well. But I want to give you a chance, just because I know you have to head out. All right. So Julia says, any panelist, I've heard of proficiency tests, but are they needed? And what level of fluency did you need before it became professionally useful? So does anyone want to start us off with speaking to that for in their experience?
I can, unless someone else wants to chime in. So it's it's kind of interesting, at least where in the kind of jobs that I've looked at, a lot of times there's a test that companies use called ALTA. Maybe you've heard of it, but sometimes the company itself will administer a test to get a specific type of job. So that does happen. I think it's not always important. It is important if you wanted to study at a Japanese university, typically like actually matriculate officially, not study abroad or anything like that, or exchange. Like if you actually wanted to, they do require, um, I think it's, the advanced level in order to do that. I do think it looks good. I recently heard kind of a debate on LinkedIn where some recruiters for like legal jobs in Japan were like, well, it's okay, but we still need someone to be fluent, because there were a lot of Chinese or Korean or whatever other nationalities just taking the test, but not being able to really have kind of conversational fluency or cultural fluency. So it's important, I think, I just for me, I wanted to test myself to see like how good, my language was. I didn't really even study for it. There were even a lot of textbooks that you can get to study specifically for the exam. But I remember I just thought like, no, just based on my own study program, I want to see how good, my language is. And I remember I went to the university that they were hosting it. And like basically, I think I was the only Westerner there. Everyone was Chinese, or from Southeast Asia or something like that. So it wasn't, so it's probably more important, I think, for students from those countries to because that is one big thing. I know a lot of like students from Southeast Asia like to study in Japan, so that's probably more important for them.
I can jump in with just a brief thought on that theme. I think it truly depends on what the job application is for. Like, what would you apply those language skills towards? For instance, if you were trying to translate or interpret in like a healthcare setting or a profession, like a government setting, um, you would most likely have to take some sort of proficiency or prove your credentials in order to do that. Um, However, if it's just something that you can demonstrate cultural proficiency and be able to work well with international partners, they probably wouldn't have you take a test for that. I think it really depends on like what does the job want you to use that language skill for, and is it regulated? Like being a professional translator or interpreter is a regulated thing, so that would require like some sort of documented proof.
And in the job I have now, I wish I spoke Mandarin, but I don't, and don't need to for it. But I did work at the International Republican Institute, and that is an organization that promotes democracy abroad. And in that role, I was in charge of the Mexico and Cuba Democracy Project. So I had to speak Spanish, and it was more not a proficiency exam, but just demonstrating in the interview and with my colleagues that I could talk about democracy and work and everything that we were doing in Spanish, conduct meetings, write emails. So it was very much necessary for that.
If I could add, similar to what Laura just said and the others, it's situation specific. In my case, the testing that I had to do to get on the MIT team, you had okay, so ecology had ecological terms, right? So anything to do with water and solid waste or whatever. So they did give you like a 150-page document where you could look over the words and so on and all the vocabulary, et cetera, et cetera. But that was just to give you an idea of what to expect. But the basis of the written test was, how your grammar. And then they gave you some potential things to translate, it had to do with a survey or public access or something like that. So for us, for me, it was very situation specific. So it just depends on the job. and what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that I guess there would be, depending on what you're translating, there would be potentially some specific vocabulary that you might not have encountered in other places. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Julia. Feel free to email me and I can send you the recording for the rest of our conversation, but I hope you have a good evening. Michael, what questions do you have for our panelists? Again, feel free to either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask, whatever works best for you. And while Michael is working on putting questions in, I'm curious because a lot of students have a lot of kind of different directions that they're interested in, and maybe, you know, college is a time for exploration. So I'm curious, how did you all decide what career path you wanted to pursue? Emma, would you like to go first for this one?
Sure. It's the question I can't really answer because I never really had a determined path. It was just kind of like I set myself up to get into healthcare, not because I was extremely passionate about it, but because it was like and this is all very exciting. It was a family trade, and I knew I could always support myself by having that skill. And then once I had that, it allowed me to follow my other passions, which was going back to school, getting a Bachelor of Arts. But kind of along that path, just life happens. Kind of like what Rico was saying, you're gonna sometimes have major setbacks. Like I was building up my career and I was teaching in dental hygiene and I had this whole thing going for me and I was teaching at two different institutions and then COVID happened. And I lost both of those jobs because the schools shut down all of their clinics. And I literally had to start from ground zero and restart my career. But it ended up working out okay because I found a new position at the School of Dentistry in Kansas City. And now I'm in a totally different like trajectory. I went away from clinical hygiene and deep dived into public health research. So you never kind of know. It's hard for me to say like, you're like, oh, I had a plan. It was mostly just, I just went about my life day to day. When an opportunity came up, I tended to say yes, which is kind of a problem. Sometimes you have to learn how to say no as well. But saying yes to a lot of things has brought me a lot of good. So, yeah, just kind of don't be afraid to take a leap. And it's okay when things don't go well because you never know, something else might be right around the corner that was even better.
Sure, that is such a good point. Laura, what are your thoughts on how you decided which career path to pursue?
Well, in college, I started out pre-med and realized that the sciences at college level, and I did not get along. And I had always wanted to be a doctor and always excelled in prior. So I then kind of switched gears and thought about pre-law, but underlying everything, I loved international relations. I didn't know what that could become, but that was always the common thread. So I I also got a journalism degree after I had gotten my foreign affairs degree at master's level. So 2 masters, and then came back here. All of those skills, though, helped me do what I do. You're speaking to elected officials, you're taking complicated information and putting it into talking points, communicating it, oftentimes, in front of large groups of people. So I feel like all that skill set got me there, but it was a lot of steps along the way. The job prior to being at TSMC, I worked for Mayor Gallego of Phoenix and was a senior policy advisor, economic development and water, international and arts were all in my portfolio. And so when we're trying to recruit this large Taiwanese company, I worked very closely with them, economic development and water being two big issues. And so then I was able to go into this role. But it took all those jobs along the way. Some of them I didn't want to be in as long as I was in, but learned a lot of skill sets and then you get to where you're meant to be.
Sure. Yeah, that seems to be a little bit of a theme for now at least. Awesome. Rico?
Yeah, I think for me, because it was definitely a question I had all my entire education, of like what do I do? But what I've learned is that you don't really decide one time, what your career is going to be. I feel like it's a decision you're constantly making. I'm constantly making the decision every year, every month, I'm making the decision of where I want my career to go. Initially I had a younger brother who was going to law school before me, and he thought, I think you might like it. I still wasn't sure. But I would talk to other attorneys. I tried to kind of do a fact-finding mission, ask them like what they do, if they like it. Um, and I did apply, and I enjoyed law school absolutely. Um, but I thought again, once I get the law degree, then I'll be set. I wouldn't have to worry about things. And I was completely wrong about that. Um, but I'm also constantly learning about opportunities. You're making a decision, but you're only making it based on the information that you have right now. But as you go through life, as you go through different careers, you're going to be acquiring more and more information that will allow you to make the next decision. One of the things I loved, I was able to clerk in Phoenix at the federal district court for a federal judge. So it was just one summer. I didn't get paid at all, but I absolutely loved that job. I mean, it was like the best job I ever had, constantly talking with a judge, how to write the, draft the opinions. We talked about stuff. I got to see trials. I got to see, really high level attorneys. And I thought it was amazing, but to get that like full time, there's like, 3,000 applications for like one position. It's just nearly impossible. I almost had a position, but that fell through. But I still haven't closed that door completely. People still go back to be a clerk at the court after experience. So that's also a possibility. But I think yeah, like I was saying, the information you have isn't static. So I'm always on the lookout. I'm always updating my resume. I still interview. I still build my network. I think, I hate interviewing. I mean, I hate it with a passion. I do not like it at all. But it's kind of like something you just force yourself to do the thing you don't like until you get more comfortable doing it, like going to the gym, something you're always going to do. And I use those interviews as also fact finding. I ask them like, well, what does an average day look like? Or, why is this position available? Like, what are your problems? Like, are you growing? Did someone leave? It's a two-way street to do that. So I feel like, again, always trying to, improve your knowledge of like what kind of opportunities are out there. There's opportunities out there that I never even heard of before, but that I'm learning about them now, that seem really fascinating and interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely interviewing is a skill all in itself, it seems. But yeah, Emma was saying sometimes the path is only clear in hindsight, or then yeah, what you were adding on to that is sometimes you have to have the experiences before you know things that then kind of take you to your next place. You don't know what you don't know until you experience it. Awesome. And then Joanne, I think you told me that you knew fairly early on what you wanted to do, right? Early on in your career.
Yeah, well, as an immigrant, I had a certain background. The parents are like, you will be going to school and you will be doing the following, blah, 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 blah. This is the background that I had. Now, whether or not I ended up doing what they wanted me to do is the other story. But my degrees, my first two degrees were in business, right? It had something to do with business. So I thought, okay, I'm going to head in that direction. And so everything that I've done has been along those lines. It's used those things that I've learned. But then I always remembered I enjoyed languages too, which is why Spanish came into focus as well. But I think I also mentioned to you, Miriam, that mid team I was on, they decided to end it. So, okay, I have my Spanish degree. What am I using it for? Well, I still have friends who speak Spanish, but I'm a musician part time. And I play songs in Spanish as well because I feel it's important to connect with your audience. And my audience in this valley is at least 50% Hispanic. So I feel like I still have a way to use the language. And so for me, the career is just what I enjoy. I enjoy music. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy getting a paycheck. Um, but I do enjoy using all the different things I've learned throughout my life in whatever I'm doing. So I'm an admin assistant to the director here at Ecology. Works for me. I'm fine with that. It brings me joy. It's fulfilling. So I guess for me, if it's to anyone who's just trying to find a career path, you never know what that's going to be. It changes from day to day. It could be like Amazon COVID screws everything up. You never know. Just find a way to be happy with what you're doing. Accept it till you find what you want. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And that's such a great reminder about also, having things that you love outside of your work and, being able to
Mhm.
use your Spanish with music to connect with your audience and thinking about other ways, we're very focused on career, but
Mhm.
other things there, there are other parts to your personality besides your career. Amazing. So even though I had, talked to a lot of you beforehand and, read your kind of written bios about what your career path before. I'm learning so much just hearing your stories kind of virtually. So this has been really fun, and I'm so glad that we recorded it so that I can share it with others who weren't able to be here. But for our last question, unless anyone else has anything that they want to ask, like ask each other, or if anyone else has, anything else they want to do, I was thinking to close out, kind of what's your advice for current ASU students, either for their time at ASU or as they prepare to graduate and start out as, starting out in the workforce?
I
Um,
just wanted to add just a quick comment before we
yeah.
go to that segment, just about kind of like I think everyone mentioned, Laura mentioned that the skills that you learn along the way and other kind of jobs really come in handy. So I do a lot of Japanese translation as part of my job. Sometimes it's giving summaries of documents, but a lot of times they want an actual translation. And one of the most difficult translations I did was the difficult part was not the Japanese. The difficult part was they wanted me to translate like an engineering report, so it had all of the engineering schematics and the tables and charts and things like that. And so I had learned a lot about, you know, different programs like Photoshop or Adobe or things like that, right? And so because I knew that software well, I was able to more efficiently like create an overlay, add my translation to it, and do that. So a lot of times it's the Japanese, it's a foreign language skill you have plus another skill combined that allows you to like really achieve it in your career.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's something that I've been hearing kind of because, we have career services and, people in ASU who are looking at the different trends and what employers are looking for. So that's something that we've been hearing a little bit of too, is like the language and the cultural knowledge and things are important, but it's also the additional skills that you have that you're bringing on top of that. So yeah, that's a really good point. Um, all right. Does anybody want to start us off with our final question for advice you have for students, for recent graduates? And I know you've been kind of sprinkling some amazing advice in through the entire thing, but anything that you haven't had a chance to mention yet or that you wanted to mention?
Sure. I think interning is really important. If you're interested in something and you're just not sure about it, I would take as many opportunities as I could to do internships, and in those internships, try to learn a little bit from every department so that you kind of know how an organization works. I think that was really the most important thing for me when I was at the city of Phoenix. I knew how the water department worked and how all of these departments interacted with city council and the city manager's office. And so in my role, I had a huge advantage because if we had any kind of a problem, I would know the people and also know how to kind of navigate city hall. So as much as you can, try to learn how organizations work, different organizations, and intern in all the places where you have a passion.
Yeah, that's great. I have a follow-up question for you, Laura, with that. Do you have any recommendations for how students can go about finding internships that align well with their goals? Or how did you find your internship?
Yeah, let me think where I interned at ASU. I went to career services, I guess, and I was a political science minor. So I interned at the Secretary of State's office. So I got to kind of see how the state government worked and different departments and got to know some faces there. Um, when I was at Georgetown, I interned at the White House, and it was a very interesting time. It was President Clinton was president, and I was in the First Lady's office. So a little scandal broke out while I was there, and kind of was a very interesting time to be there. But unfortunately, just spent limited time with the First Lady, which is what I wanted. So I think the career services departments within your uh, majors, minors are probably good places.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other final advice that anyone wanted to share?
Uh, yeah, I'd like to, but I didn't want to. I want to let other people speak. I know I don't want to, take too much time, but if anyone else wants to go. Okay. Well, if not, one other thing I thought about as kind of preparing for this is to like constantly be learning. Well, there's a couple of other things, but constantly be learning. Um, we have to do it and I think there's other like licensed professions that do the same thing, like the medical profession, but we have what we call continuing legal education. So we have a certain number of CLEs, we call them, that we have to maintain our license every year. But you can pick, what those CLEs are. And so a lot of times I know attorneys were just picking anything, like some kind of like a discounted bundle of just different courses that they could just meet the requirements. But I would try and do some research. I wanted to do CLEs that were relevant to my actual job. So we would use like software platform called Relativity, this e-discovery platform. And I found that there was a users conference in Chicago on it, and a lot of people would go, including attorneys. So I'd pay my own way. I would go, I registered, and it was, no one knew about it. No one from my company knew I was going there. But I learned so much, and I was able to get more skill set on the software. So then when they need something done, it's like I know how to do that. I know how to create searches. I know how to export things. I know how to, manage the database and even speak to IT better if there's any kinds of issues. And so, like, there's so many things. I mean, on the one hand, you kind of there's a frustration because you have to pay for all these additional certifications on top of like, your degrees. But there's so many that are really important. Even right now, I just finished an executive program with Berkeley Law on called General Counsel University, and then I've enrolled in another one on commercial contracts with UC Berkeley Law. So the good thing about that is, again, I'm doing those jobs at work, and on top of that, I'm getting kind of a lot of good quality education. And then I'm also networking with anyone else who's taking that course. And so anyone else who's taking that course, I connect with them on LinkedIn. We keep in touch. Sometimes I'll call them, and you really have to, people talk about using your network. And it's, again, something that you're building over time. You build your network over a long period of time, like a garden. You're honing it, you're meeting people, you're connecting, you're talking with them, you're helping people. I had people that I work for who, they weren't attorneys, they were Japanese, they were translators, but they wanted to go to law school. So they'd ask me for letters of recommendation, for example, and I would write those for them, especially if I loved that they did great work for me. Um, so that's also important to help other people, who are starting, but then also, you never know who's going to help you. There's been a lot of people that have reached out to me over the years to try to help me where I didn't take advantage of it, you know. And like the story I told you where I didn't get the job that I wanted. I was embarrassed actually for, several of those early years. I would go to like meet and greets with other attorneys, and I didn't want to stay long because I didn't want them to say like, well, where are you working? And then have to like say, well, it's this contract position and it's not at some, fancy law firm. But there really isn't any, like, looking back, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. You're dealt the cards that you have, and you do the best with what you have, and you just keep pushing forward. The other thing I was thinking about is about mentoring. A lot of times I thought about mentoring as like a structured mentor program where someone says, I'm your mentor, and you learn from them. But really, I've learned from so many people that didn't like officially, that weren't officially my mentor. And a lot of it's just observing how your bosses work, how they communicate, how they write. I've had other people that I've just observed how they interact. They're great communicators. And I adopt and like borrow and incorporate like best practices from them into my own work. And so a lot of it is every job you have, no matter what job it is, you're learning skills from that job and you're incorporating them, and then you take it with you to your next job, and you go in that and you go from there that way.
Yeah, that's great. The thanks for sharing that with especially with the networking piece, because I know that can be something that's so important, but it can also be a little bit intimidating when you're just starting out, or when you maybe are not just starting out, and if you just haven't done a lot of networking, it can be a little bit intimidating to get started. Awesome. Emma, do you have any final thoughts?
Sure. Rico, you're a tough act to follow there. That was a lot of great insight. I would definitely second that finding mentors, even informally, and finding out like what is it about them that makes you like look at them as a mentor. What is it that you want to try to emulate? And how can you incorporate that into your own life? The other thing I would say is always always know that life doesn't happen all at once, and no matter what happens like right after graduation, it is such a small part of your whole story. But please don't stress too much about it. The more that you can be relaxed and enjoy your life, the more people are going to gravitate and want to be around you. And the easier it will be to get through like stressful situations and stressful interviews. If you have grounding, if you have a community that like is outside of this kind of stressful, like I got to start a career, I got to do XYZ, and I'm on a timeline and I got to get it done. That really puts a lot of cognitive pressure on us that is just not necessary at this time in our lives. So, be good to yourself, get lots of sleep, find mentors, and just practice soft skills. Because that really, no matter, I worked in a lot of different fields, and that's the thing that really makes or breaks somebody in the long term of their career is whether or not they can play nice with others, fit well in a team, be open to constructive criticism or correction, and grow as a person without, being abrasive. The people you want to be around tend to, just gather those opportunities. So expand your interests, expand your knowledge, be open to change and growth, and just model those people that you really admire.
Amazing. Thank you. And then Joanne, any last thoughts?
Um, y'all are hard to follow. I guess I'll just say when I went through ASU, I was working full time. I also had a family, and finding time to sleep and get everything done and work was difficult, but it's doable. And what's important to remember for students is you have all the time in the world, really. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just take it one step at a time. It is possible. It is doable. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Also for, recent graduates and for folks who are, trying to figure out how to use their skills, even if you don't have a job that uses it yet, there are ways to keep up with your skills. Something that I continue to do today is I will go to newspaper articles that are in the language that I study. I will read. I'm reading, always reading novels and science fiction or biographies, whatever, in the language that I studied. I'll watch TV shows and movies and documentaries in the language. I'll find speaking opportunities. This could be something as small as you're in a grocery store and the lady's in front of you who has no idea. She wants to communicate with the cashier about something and she doesn't know how to say it in English, but you can help her with her communication. That's an opportunity, right? So there's always something you can do, no matter how small. Just take it one day at a time.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love the reminder about finding other ways, when you're, outside of work life to also keep kind of practicing and honing your language skills and improving. Um, awesome. Well, I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their week, and thank you so much for being here. I will go ahead and stop the recording.